Hi guys, I hope your week is going well. We are going to finish up the last two chapters of They Came to Worthington, A Family Adventure. We have chapters 9 and 10, but they are both short, so we will get them finished up and we will be done with our Old Worthington read aloud. All right, chapter 9, The Indian Terror. By the spring of 1812, the war with Great Britain had changed the peaceful air around Worthington. Great Britain had stirred up resentment among the Indian tribes against the American settlers. There was constant fear of Indian raids. Only recently, an Indian chief named Leather Lips had been executed by his own people because they thought he had been friendly to the white settlers. Although the execution had taken place near a settlement named Dublin, several miles west of Worthington, the town was uneasy. One day in spring of 1812, a group of men from Worthington decided to cross the creek just north of the village to cut logs. The women planned to gather on the big double cabin for a sewing bee that would last all day. Louisa Talbot wished the women would talk of something other than the Indians. One of the women had said that her husband had heard a report that the Indians were about to slaughter the settlers of Worthington. She was quiet as the women finished the morning stitches and paused for a few moments for a light noon meal. Then Cynthia Kilburn stood up. "Louisa, shall we get back to work?" Hannah and her mother exchanged glances. "I'll stay here for a moment and clear away the dishes, Mrs. Kilburn," Hannah said. Louisa looked back over her shoulder at her daughter, thinking, "My, how quickly the children have grown." Hannah hummed to herself as she closed the door from the room, picked up a broom, and began to sweep the crumbs. Then it happened. Bang! In closing the door, Hannah had knocked over a hunting rifle, which was kept ready and loaded since the Indian scare had become worse. Mama smiled. Perhaps that should be our little secret. They both knew what had started the whole thing. Several weeks later, Mama looked out the door to the house to see Papa coming across the village green, laughing as though he would never stop. "Whatever is so funny, Matthew Talbot?" she asked. "Let me get settled so that I can talk, and I'll tell you the funniest story you've heard in years," Papa answered as he sat down. "I was just over at Ezra Griswold's inn, and all the men are talking about what happened last night up near Delaware, where the militia men from Worthington are camped. It seems that Captain Kilburn thought he had pretty green troops for the move north when the time comes, so he decided to make up a test to show just how brave the men would be in the face of an Indian attack. When they bedded down for the night, they were pretty jumpy. They went to bed with their clothes on, ready for action at a moment's notice. About midnight, the captain ordered a lieutenant to fire his gun. At the sound of that shot, one of the enlisted men scrambled out of his blanket. Each one ran off terror-stricken in all directions. Each man ran to his own home. They say when one of the young men got back to his home here in Worthington, he found he was wearing only his shirt collar. Running those 9 miles through that brush and trees, every stitch of his clothing had been torn off, and he hadn't even noticed. The whole family talked and laughed about the great Indian scare, all the way through supper. But the laughing stopped when Jed said quietly, "Pa, I've decided to join Thomas Russell when the army marches through here. I'm 17 now and old enough to help this war over, so we can quit being so all fired scared of the Indians all the time. Several of the others are going, and I want to go with them." Mama caught her breath, and Hannah said, "Oh, Jed, do you really have to go?" But Matthew nodded his head and answered, "It's all right, my boy, if you are determined to go. If it weren't for your mama and Hannah, I'd have gone with the militia from here. I understand young Henry Morrison has already signed up, so you'll have a companion." Chapter 10, which I believe is our last chapter. Jed goes to war. Worthington was now sending supplies to the United States Army encampment in Sandusky. Each day, wagons go through town carrying war supplies northward. Matthew and Jed decided that Jed could get a ride on one of these wagons to Sandusky and join there. The day came for Jed to leave. A small crowd of people were already on the village green waiting for the supply wagons to appear. The Morrisons were among them, with young Henry. It was a quiet, subdued group, which talked in hushed tones and watched the road that came from the south and led to the green. Then they heard the rumble of the wheels through the misty rain. The wagon slowed and then creaked to a stop at the southern end of the green. The drivers laid the reins aside and stepped carefully down. Some of them walked across the road to the Kilbournes' tavern to bring back buckets of water for their horses. Jed looked around the green, remembering the faces of the families he had come to know so well during a long journey from Connecticut. They had become close friends during the years of building the town he called home. "Goodbye, Pa," he said in a low voice to Matthew, as the two men shook hands. "Take care of Mama and Hannah, and I'll send a letter by post as soon as I have a chance." Lovisa had to look up at her tall, young son as he put her arms around her. "Don't worry, Mama." As for Hannah, it seemed that part of her was leaving with her twin brother. They had shared so much of their lives together. There were hardly any words to say what she was thinking. All she said was, "Goodbye, Jed." With that, Jed was into the wagon and the wheels were moving on toward the north. He waved until Mama and Hannah could no longer see him through their tears. As they turned to go back to the green, Matthew put his arms on Mama's shoulder. "Don't worry, Mother. We must help each other and remember Jed is in our prayers. The same God that protected us all the way from Connecticut and during the build of Worthington will watch over him and see him safely back to us." The end. That is the end of our Old Worthington read aloud. I don't think there's anything else. I want to point out that we started our story in 1803 and we just ended it in 1812. So many years had passed. They had built a whole town. Many things had happened in the growing of Worthington. I hope you guys recognized some of those names in there. Dublin was in this last chapter. Does that sound familiar to you? And this kind of gives you an idea of how Worthington came about and the history of Worthington. All right, thank you for joining me in these read alouds. I miss you guys. Have a good rest of your week. Bye.